Okay, morality students, this is going to be the video to accompany the section on conscience that you read pages 141 to 147. And before we get anywhere, before we do anything else, I want you to get in your notes, regardless of what you had earlier, the definition of not morality, the definition of conscience. In addition to it being that interior voice that kind of tells us what to do, I want you to make sure that you know the definition is given by Pope John Paul II. Conscience is described as the proximate norm of personal morality. Proximate, Proximate, proximate norm of personal morality. Go ahead and write that down and then pause it if you need to. Now we're going to get down into what those terms mean. Proximate literally means near to. Okay? When you talk about approximating something, you're talking about making a guess that's near to the truth. Same thing. Proximate is an adjective. Saying it is the proximate norm. Now, what is a norm? Literally, in this particular instance, it translates to normal in the sense of the thing that we normally ought to be doing. And it also stands for a standard. Okay? So, the conscience serves as the proximate norm. In other words, the near standard that we are expected to follow of personal morality. Now, note, personal morality, that term can be misleading. Because remember how we talked about morals and values and how morals are objective and values are subjective? And this notion of a personal morality makes it sound like, oh, I get to create my own morals. Wrong. It is still wrong. What the conscience does here, in terms of being a proximate norm of personal morality, is that the conscience serves literally as a guide to us in determining what the externally correct moral action is. Okay? But this is still a personal journey that we go on. Make no mistake. Morals are still externally driven. They are objectively true. We do not get to determine them for ourselves. Okay? Before we go anywhere else, we got to make sure that we are clear on that. All right. Now, I want to turn to page 142 and take a look at that last paragraph before section B. It should be said that quite obviously people understand by conscience that internal voice in which each human says to a person, that's right, this is wrong, you should not do this. So we're talking about that internal voice. Okay. But what exactly is that voice? Now, there's this section on conscience versus superego. And very briefly, I'm going to give a description of what superego is. Very, very briefly. Think of the movie, oh gosh. Sorry, I can't believe it. It has to do with this prince that gets turned into a llama. Holy cow, I've forgotten it. The big fat guy. You know the movie I'm talking about. At any rate, it also has Kronk in it. See, I can remember the characters' names, but I can't remember the name of the movie. And it's Kronk I want to talk about. Because there's this scene, there's a couple of scenes where Kronk is considering, what should I do? What do I do in this situation? And then these two figures pop up. There's the devil on one shoulder, and then there's the angel on the other. Okay? This is an old idea. It stems back to a cartoon called The Flintstones, which was popular in the 60s. Perhaps you've heard of it. It was the same thing there. Whenever Fred, the protagonist, sometimes had a moral decision, he wasn't quite sure what to do, these angels would pop. Well, they weren't angels. One was a devil, and one was the angel. The angel is called the id. Okay? This is a Freudian idea. Sigmund Freud, father of modern psychology. We'll talk about him in psych next year. Anyway, his notion is that there's a conscious self, the one that makes decisions. There's the id. These are our impulses. These are our emotions. These are our desires that sometimes want to do unpleasant things. Someone annoys you, your first instinct, punch him in the face. That's the id. Okay? But you will note, people get annoyed all the time. There's not a whole lot of punching going on. I mean, there certainly is some, but not everyone's punching. And yet a lot of people are having those urges. I guarantee you, not everyone having the urge to punch is punching. And the reason for that, to some extent, is the angel on the shoulder. This is a thing called the superego. Now, the superego is the one that says, more or less, stop, wait, think. Do we really want to do that? Are there rules that are preventing us from doing so? There are some folks who would suggest that conscience and superego are coincident, that they're synonymous, and there is some legitimacy to this. But Freud would also say that sometimes the superego could be crippling. Sometimes it would prevent us from doing things that we otherwise might need to be doing. Or we're questioning ourselves so often that we end up not doing anything. You have a decision to make. Do I do this or do I do that? It's like, well, option A sounds good, but here are the problems with it. Well, let's go with option B, but then there's problems associated with that. Well, so then you check section A, you decide to go with option A, and then you continually second guess yourself. Freud would call that an overactive superego. That's not quite what we mean by conscience, but in the sense that the superego is this thing that says, stop, wait, is that in your best interest? That potentially can be the conscience as well, but arguably the conscience is also a little bit more sophisticated than that. In theory, the conscience is actually able to properly weigh various options and then determine really what the morally correct action is. Superego sometimes simply says no. The conscience sometimes can say yes, do that. Not driven by the id, and I'm kind of slamming my notions here together, but anyway, there are definitely some similarities. Now, with regards to section C, 3 ways our consciences function. First, that second paragraph, the conscience in each of us moves us to seek both to know and to do what's good and conversely to avoid evil. The instinct within us is what's rightly called conscience. So, when you get that instinct that says right or wrong, not the first impulse, okay? So, again, let's use this idea that someone bumped into you. Your initial reaction is, punch him! Again, your conscience is going to say, no, stop, wait. Maybe they made a mistake, maybe they tripped. Whatever the case may be. Be patient and wait. That particular internal voice, that's your conscience. And that's one of the first purposes it serves, is to simply say, stop and wait. But note the second purpose, or the second phase. When we're confronted with a complicated ethical question, for example, the question whether to withdraw life support systems for a relative who's been seriously injured and is brain dead, we have to seek information about what is the morally right decision for our family in this situation. So, I'm going to put the question to you. And I'm not going to answer this right now. Let us say that we have a relative who is on a ventilator. Okay, they're on an artificial breathing machine and they're brain dead. Okay. Is it all right for you to disconnect the ventilator? We'll resolve that question tomorrow. I'm not going to get any farther with that. But this sort of thing, that's the second phase of conscience. It's like, well, what do I do? I mean, do I disconnect it? That would seem to be killing them. But on the other hand, if I leave them connected, they're suffering artificially, and their suffering's being extended. What do I do? Okay, so the second phase is literally like asking that question and going, I've got to research. I have to talk to others. Maybe I have to do some reading. Maybe I have to consult my doctor. I don't know. But you have to go outside of yourself. See, conscience is more than just following that interior voice. Sometimes the conscience is telling you to seek more information. That's the second phase of conscience functioning. The third function then is the upshot of this process. We then reach a decision. This is what God wants me to do. At some point, we're going to have an extended discussion, and I'm not sure how to do this online. But we're going to have an extended discussion about abortion. We're going to have an extended discussion about contraception. We're going to talk about same-sex marriage. We're going to talk about all those hot-button issues. I want to talk about contraception for just a moment. And if you've heard this story before, I apologize, but I'll go ahead and tell it anyway. So my wife and I had our 5th child, and my wife was having some health complications. Pregnancy was hard on her. It was physically very, very hard on her. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it caused some significant health problems, and if those health problems were allowed to go on far enough, it could potentially endanger her life. So we said, well, it would be actually the morally right thing to do would be for her to go on contraception. Now, before I go any further, I need to make it quite clear the church is foursquare opposed against this, and I'll go into the reasons why later. For now, let's just assume my wife and I are trying via our conscience to figure the best way of doing things. In her case, it'd be best to prevent a conception. So, we actually got a prescription for her to go on the birth control pill. Now, very briefly, how the birth control pill works, it creates in the woman a state of artificial pregnancy. In other words, the body is fooled into thinking it's pregnant when it's really not. Now, one of the functions that ceases happening when a woman is pregnant is she stops ovulating. Okay? No more ovulation, no more periods for the duration of the pregnancy, and sometimes for up to 8 months even after you give birth. So that's one of the blessings of pregnancy, is that the monthly cycle stops. The pill is designed to fool the woman's body into thinking it's pregnant so the cycle stops. Okay? And then if the cycle stops, the woman cannot get pregnant. So that's one way in which the pill prevents pregnancy. And that was the premise that my wife and I were working off of, that this then is perfectly okay. It's like, all right. So we fill out the prescription, we get the prescription, and then my conscience is saying, seek more information, make sure this is okay. So I start reading very, very carefully the functions of the pill and the potential side effects. One of the side effects is this. Now, guys, don't start snickering. Okay? Ladies, I apologize, but it's in a good cause. What causes a woman's period is that every month there is this buildup on the lining of the interior of the uterus of blood and tissue. This allows for an embryo to implant on the wall of the uterus so it then can start growing into a baby. And every month, if there is no pregnancy, the uterus has to slough this material off, and that is what results in menstruation. That's what results in a period. Okay, so there's this lining in the uterus. This is the point. The pill is supposed to prevent conception, in the sense of it prevents the sperm from meeting an egg by preventing an egg from coming out. But sometimes it doesn't do that. Sometimes the egg will still come out. Okay? So, woman's on the pill, she's thinking she can't conceive, but she does ovulate. And then if she does have intercourse and a sperm does meet the egg, now we have a pregnancy. Problem. The egg then travels down to the uterus, and there is no lining on the uterus for it to implant, so subsequently it simply passes out of the woman's body without implanting. This is known as a miscarriage. Another term for miscarriage is spontaneous abortion. The problem is this: the spontaneous abortion came about as a result of the pill. So, using the pill can result in an abortion. It's not specifically an intended one, but it still can result in an abortion. My wife and I read that and we said, we can't do this. We simply cannot do this. We may not be so terribly clear on contraception, but we're very, very clear on abortion. Then if the pill can cause even a spontaneous abortion, it's no bueno, it is a no-go, we cannot do it. She never took the prescription. That's the third part of the process. We reach a decision. And the decision is this: what is God's will for us in this situation? What is God's will for your relative that's on a ventilator? Do you pull the plug or do you maintain it? All right, I'm 13 minutes in. I had a feeling this was going to take 2 videos, so I'm going to stop here. There will be a second video for you to look at, and then we will discuss those tomorrow. See ya.